Welcome to week 28 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We've watched episode 133, originally aired Monday, February 4th, 1985. Now, Eden has just found out that Sophia is alive, and she's not happy about it. She is very upset that her mother clearly stayed away from the family for all those years.
Mm-hmm.
She asks why she stayed away for so long, and Sophia doesn't really have a good answer, so she ends up telling Sophia to stay away from Cece and to leave town and not to bother coming to Kelly's wedding.
And one of the interesting things about this conversation, we had speculated last time about how Lionel Lockridge would play a role in this conversation, whether that would be something that Sophia could use to help gain Eden's sympathy, or whether it would be an influential thing at all, and it completely wasn't. Sophia brought up Lionel Lockridge and started to go on about how he tried to kill her and such, and Eden just sort of brushed that aside.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't interested in that at all.
Mm-hmm.
As far as she was concerned, this was all about Sophia staying away from her family for no particularly good reason.
Mm-hmm. And I think Eden had previously said that she just remembers her mom not being there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But we do get a little more of an insight into Eden's time in Europe in this scene as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, Cruz arrives, and Marcello tries to keep him out, but he eventually gets in, and Cruz and Eden then leave. Cruz does not see Sophia's face because she's facing away from the door.
Yeah.
And then Marcello mentions to Sophia that he saw Eden once or twice after the incident on the train.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the roulette table, do you think that's on the train? Because I was thinking there was an incident on a train, obviously the train that's been mentioned before, and then I thought this may have been a later incident at a casino, but because they have a flashback to the roulette game that we saw previously where Eden stole Marcello's chip, and what happened after that is that Sophia had walked up and Eden had recognized her. And then Marcello had very quickly hypnotized Eden to forget that Sophia was there. Now, I had assumed that the incident on the train was an earlier incident where Marcello had plenty of time to hypnotize Eden properly, and that this was like just a follow-up. Oh, you've got to forget this. Because otherwise it was a very quick hypnotism. He shined a light in her face and said, "You're entering a tunnel! And when you come out, you'll forget you ever saw your mother."
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was thinking. That this was Marcello, following up on a previous hypnotism of Eden. Otherwise, it's just kind of goofy.
Yeah, it's still, to me, quite sinister that they would have hypnotized her at all. Just it seems to be going to extremes to follow someone and then hypnotize them to not remember you're there, and then keep following them anyway. So it just seems, it does seem really extreme to me. So, and I imagine if and when Eden finds out about this, that'll be even more upsetting to her than seeing Sophia and remembering that she exists and has abandoned the family.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm putting this together with what Eden said to Cruz when they mentioned their trip on the Orient Express, when she said, "I don't remember much of that trip."
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm wondering, if somehow Sophia and Eden had met, and she tried to reconcile with Eden, and maybe the same thing happened. Eden said, "Oh, why did you stay hidden all these years?" And then that's why she asked Marcello to hypnotize her, and the whole trip got wiped out. That's kind of, between this and that, that's what I'm thinking in my head. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this roulette thing is actually on the train, and this is maybe just the one little incident. But maybe it did mess up her mind. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't think we heard any train sounds or anything in this roulette scene.
No.
Whereas I'm pretty sure when Lionel was on the train with Marcello and Sophia, it was very obvious it was a train.
Well, trains are noisy things, if you've ever ridden on them.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that this is a secondary hypnosis and that the original one did involve a tunnel and a train, and we'll see. I think we're going to see, we'll get more flashbacks to flesh out this European meeting.
It did make me wonder if at all, this conversation with Eden will make Sophia rethink some of the things that have been driving her, because she's been very, very driven on revenge to Lionel Lockridge and dressed up as Dominic and everything just to achieve that aim. And with Eden basically blowing that off, I wonder if that will make Sophia rethink the importance of all of that, as well as a driving force.
Yeah, because she had said she couldn't reveal herself to her family until Joe was cleared, so she was tying it all in with that. So on the drive home, Eden asked Cruz if, setting aside your feelings for me, do you think I'm a bad person? And, doesn't really say that he thinks she's bad.
No.
And then at one point in her conversation, she says, how long does it take before you forgive someone? So she's, I guess, thinking of having to forgive Sophia. Obviously, she's only had a few minutes, really, to contemplate this.
Yeah. Sophia must hope, or must wish, if her intention ever was to actually reveal herself. I still think she was maybe playing Lionel along a little bit with that, but she must wish that maybe she hadn't started with Eden as the first reveal, because Eden's much more hardline than I think Kelly or Tad appear to be. And she might have gotten a softer entrance into this with one of them.
Yeah, she did go to her Eden third. So,
but Eden's the one who ended up with the reveal.
Now I wonder if, even with being hypnotized to forget that you met your mother, I can't imagine Eden's subconscious hasn't just been thinking about it for all these years, and maybe that adds some animosity to the whole encounter.
Well, and they may not have ever had the same relationship as some of the others, She seems to be especially close to CC. So, it might just be part of their family dynamic as well.
Yeah. I mean, with Lionel's deadline looming, it's not like Sophia can just not tell the rest of the family. She's clearly decided she wants to be at Kelly's wedding. So, at the church, Joe and the Reverend arrive, and they basically restaged the scene from Friday's cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Kelly doesn't spend any time working on her eyes, doesn't even sit down at the chair in the reprise. Immediately notices the flowers, doesn't do this wandering around the room. And then as she runs to the door and screams Joe, Joe actually bursts in. And the Reverend arrives quite quickly, and they mention the flowers to him, and he said, I think my wife was going to put a bouquet of flowers in here. So he actually accidentally ends up covering for Peter.
Yeah.
So Tad shows up at one point, and Kelly tells him that Lakin dropped out of the ceremony.
Yeah.
So Ted's annoyed for that. He goes to find Lakin to apologize for telling Mason, and she doesn't really care and gives him back a box of all the stuff he's given her. Although she was looking at something at the end, wasn't she? Some kind of trinket. It wasn't the thing she threw into the sea, so I don't know.
I don't know if it was the locket. I couldn't quite see what it was.
So, with all the comings and goings, Peter takes the opportunity to sneak out of the cloakroom and then show up, normally, knocking on the door to give Kelly a necklace. Which, of course, throws her off, and she's a bit flustered to be alone in that room with Peter. And he says that his mother wore this necklace on the day she was married, so tying this weird psychosis in with his mother a little bit, who we did hear negative things about when he was talking to Ginger, I think. The necklace ends up falling and breaking, and Peter asks, Joe arrives by this point. He says, I got to pick up my broken necklace. So Joe, does not want Kelly and Peter in the room at the same time.
No.
So he lets Peter go in and pick up the pieces without Kelly.
Yeah.
And then Peter says, I didn't get an invitation. I wonder if I could just stay and watch the wedding. And in that way that he has of asking for things that are super creepy, but they say no.
Yeah. And it is worth remembering here, because when you've been watching, the episode, and you know what Peter's been up to, but Joe and Kelly still haven't definitively got proof that Peter is the Carnation Killer. So
no, and Kelly did hear from Mason that the timeline didn't work out at one point.
That's right.
So she was kind of relieved by that.
Yeah. So obviously they're not pleased to see him and would rather he wasn't there, but they're not. That's why they're not reacting, I think, quite in the way that we, the audience, are reacting to Peter, because we know that he is the killer and that he is seriously unhinged.
So Eden arrives at the wedding, and Kelly mentions that Sally has agreed to fill in at the last minute for Lakin. Now, of course, kind of worried about Sally, but Sally shows up with brown hair, so
should be safe.
She should be safe. Yeah, I was worried that they'd bring in Sally just to kill her off, but
it's nice to see her again.
Yeah, she burst in and had a lot of stuff to say right off the bat. Mentioned a giant limo outside, and Kelly said, "Oh, that's Jeffrey Osborne. He was supposed to go around the back, or wasn't supposed to arrive till the guests were in, or something." So they're teasing this guest star, Jeffrey Osborne, who I assume we'll see in the next episode. And then Eden spots Suzanne Carlyle going into the cloakroom.
Yeah, and she can't be happy about that, because she explicitly told Sophia not to show up. Basically, to get out of town.
Yeah, so I don't know if she'll reveal herself to Kelly before the ceremony. I think it would put a lot into Kelly's head, so I think she'll just pretend to be Suzanne Carlyle a little bit. So.
And Eden will be glaring at her the whole time, probably. Yeah, they're doing a lot in the run-up to a wedding. I don't remember having this much time to, have these conversations and go to interviews and, reveal long-lost relatives and that. Yeah.
And have a hypnosis flashback.
Yeah.
So, that's pretty much it. So I think the wedding is going to be tomorrow. So we'll finally get the big wedding we've been promised for over half a year.
Yeah. And if the wedding goes ahead, probably not without a few bumps and scrapes, but if it does go ahead, then I am definitely looking to the honeymoon night as when we'll maybe see Peter strike.
Yeah, since they've laid that seed of the room. We may get to see the big wedding that the network wants for sweeps. They probably want for sweeps without getting wrecked by Peter.
Yeah, Peter was playing it really nice today. Creepy, but he was behaving himself and not killing anyone in this episode.
Joe Cruz said to Cece at one point, "Oh, you really know how to throw a wedding." So, we will see. Hopefully the big wedding in episode 134 of Santa Barbara.
Yeah. See ya.
I'm Robin Leach. We're here at the wedding of the century as Santa Barbara royalty. Kelly Capwell marries commoner Joe Perkins. Welcome back to Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
It is Tuesday, February 5th, 1985, and we've just attended the wedding of Kelly Capwell and Joe Perkins.
It was a beautiful ceremony.
So Danny starts out by seating people. Ted is running a bit late. He's also an usher. And as he seats a particularly non-humorous couple, he says to them, "Enemies of the bride or groom." And they don't seem too pleased by his joke. Jeffrey Osborne arrives. And so does Mary Hart from Entertainment Tonight. And she sets out right away to interview Jeffrey Osborne. Yeah. So this is our surprise guest star.
Yes.
And Jackie shows up with Amy, and she meets CC. And Danny recognizes her, says, "Aren't you the new English teacher at Lyman?" And of course, during this entire day, you can assume Peter Flint is skulking in the back. There are some pillars on the set that he continues to hide behind and move around behind. So no one ever spots him.
No, he's pretty well hidden in the shadows. Now we should note that this is a different church than the one that Dominic was skulking around in. This one seems a little bit bigger and brighter to me.
Yeah, it's more golden.
Yeah.
And they've put more skulking places, I think. It kind of appears that Peter's raised a bit, like maybe there's a balcony that's not in use today. So, now back at the Capwell mansion, Ted tells Mason that Lakem broke up with him. And Mason is drunk at home, thinking about Veronica. I'm thinking this might be the reason they may have killed off Veronica, is to give Mason an extra reason to be an alcoholic.
And to be obnoxious and unpredictable during this wedding.
So, Mason goes back and forth on, should they even attend the wedding? Why don't you just stay with me? They argue about CC. At one point, Mason says, "You didn't get her pregnant, did you?" And then he says, "Now that you're splitting up with Laken, you have a golden opportunity to be the next Channing Capwell Jr." So anyway, Ted really wants to get going, and Mason says, "You know what, I'll just take a cab."
Yeah, I'm not sure Mason's even really in a condition to recognize that Ted is actually needed as part of the wedding party.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's a good thing he's taking a cab, though. Kelly asks her dad if she's resigned to all this now. Now, I had been thinking that, Cece's change of heart, may have been valid, but it doesn't seem believable to me based on his past, so I wouldn't be entirely surprised if tomorrow he's on the phone with someone saying, "Now, how are we going to get Joe Perkins out of my daughter's life?"
Right.
So it's interesting that Kelly still has that in the back of her head, even though he, on the face of it, a few weeks ago, gave his approval. So she knows her dad. So Cece says if she's happy, that means more to him than anything.
Yes.
And then Kelly says, "And you like Joe?" So she's still pushing. And Cece says, "As long as he's going to be a good husband to you."
Yeah.
So I like Kelly. I'm not 100% convinced.
No, I think he's got something cooking in the background.
Rosa gives Kelly a hand-embroidered handkerchief that Sophia had once brought her from Paris. So that's a nice borrowed thing. Cruz helps Joe put on his cufflinks, and Cruz says he wishes he would have a girl like Joe has, and then Joe says he just hasn't met the right girl yet, and then Cruz says, "Well, maybe I have."
Yeah.
So this is interesting. Cruz is...
It's a good sign for him and Eden, I think.
He's settled down from his globe-trotting in recent weeks, and now he's clearly going to pursue Eden. So we will see if Eden is just as interested.
Well, and what we know of Cruz's background is that he's been involved with a lot of women in the past, so we know that Eden must be special.
Well, we know that Eden's been with a lot of men in the past, too.
That's true. They're very similar in that way.
Cece asks Ruben and Rosa to sit with him, saying that basically Kelly's as much their daughter as his. So they do. They sit in the front row. We mostly see the Capwell side of the church because they're on the far side and the camera's on this side.
Yes.
And the Perkins is don't really know any Perkinses except Amy and Marissa, who'd be sitting in that front row, and Brick's sitting there too. But actually, is Brick even there? Because Amy's in the wedding party.
Well, and none of the Lockridges would be there. So
Amy and Jade are both in the wedding party, so it's only Marissa in that one little corner seat. So everyone else is just an extra.
Yeah.
And so they minimally show that side of it, which makes sense. Sophia, disguised as Suzanne, goes in to see Kelly, and she meets Cece there. He once again doesn't recognize his wife in yet another disguise. Suzanne says she wants to tell Kelly something, but Eden pulls her out of there and says she's going to ruin the wedding. And then Danny seats Suzanne because he says it's getting time. So then Eden sits behind her and says she wants to talk to her and pulls her back out into the lobby and says, I want to know why you were gone all these years.
Yeah.
And Sophia says, I never quit loving you. I did my best to keep track of you. And then she's pretty much pulled back in right away at that point because the wedding's about to start. Mason stumbles in and he greets the bridesmaids who are lined up and says, we who are about to live it up salute you. So Mason is very entertaining in this episode.
Yeah.
Then Ted grabs him to seat him. And he says, lead on, Macduff. And he gets seated next to Suzanne Carlyle, who is, of course, his stepmother, Sophia.
Yeah.
He does not recognize her.
I don't think, Mason's not really in any condition to recognize anyone at this point.
So the wedding begins. And Brandon comes in first as the ring bearer. And they don't drag it out like at a lot of these weddings. They're all in a cluster of 5. Chug, 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 chug. Brandon, Jade, Amy, Sally, Eden. Done. They're in. Jeffrey Osborne is singing the greatest love affair of them all at this entire time. And he sings basically the whole song as the procession comes in. And Cece brings Kelly down the aisle. Now, during the ceremony, at some point, the minister hands Kelly a book of poetry that she wanted to read from, and when she opens it to the page she wants, there is a white carnation inside. So she says, he's here somewhere, but decides eventually just to carry on with the wedding.
So Peter has obviously managed to snatch the prayer book. So he was lucky that Kelly didn't want to rehearse her prayer or whatever in advance. And he's taken the time, probably, I imagine, with an X-Acto knife to carve out a little alcove in the book for this white carnation. So this shows a tremendous amount of planning and patience on Peter's part.
Yeah, I mean, he's actually managed to do a lot. He got to the church very early, and he was there at the rehearsal, so he took in everything and plotted all this stuff that's coming as a bit of a surprise to us.
Did an arts and crafts project.
Yeah. So he's despite being under suspicion of murder, he's managed to achieve a lot this last day, probably. Although, actually, if our theory is right that there's been about 2 weeks between the rehearsal and the wedding, he's actually had a lot of time. But in that case, Mason and Monroe and Cruz haven't really advanced very much in those 2 weeks. So when they exchange rings, Peter, fiddles with his ring finger as if he too is getting a ring from Kelly.
Yeah.
And after the ceremony, Mason chats a bit more with Suzanne, who he still doesn't recognize, and finds out what she's there for, and says, well, you've got the wrong angle on the Capwell family. I had to bribe an usher to get a seat. Now we see Peter pulling out a gun just as the bride and groom are leaving going back up the aisle, but then so many people swarm into the vestibule that he puts away.
Yeah.
So we now know that Peter has a gun with him. And then Cruz reminds Eden that it's traditional for the best man and the maid of honor to dance at the reception. So he's obviously hoping maybe to advance things with Eden. With that dance as a starting point.
weddings can be an opportunity for so many things.
Mm-hmm. Maybe Jeffrey Osborne will be singing another song. And Cruz has arranged champagne and flowers to be there for the bride and groom at the hotel, which we know is the Capwell Hotel. And he says it's Brut's champagne, isn't it? Which I guess was a popular champagne in the 80s. But anyway, it's not Brut champagne. They have replaced it with something that's probably classier. So maybe they got paid by Brut.
I was going to say, but they got their little sponsorship message in.
So, but then that would be a weird sponsorship if they ended up going with a different champagne. So one of them paid them. So clearly Peter knows all of this because next thing you know, he's on the phone with the Capwell Hotel saying, "Oh, I know the bridal suite is booked, but I'd like to book the suite directly above it." And he tells the clerk that he and his bride won't want to be disturbed.
So I guess we can assume then that Peter's plan A was to have Kelly spooked by the white carnation and then take out his gun and kill her at the end, or kill everyone at the wedding. I don't know what he was planning to do with the gun. And then when that doesn't work, do you think he seems to almost come up with this other idea on the spot?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if he had a long-term plan. Why did he take out the gun and what was he planning to do? So I don't know.
I mean, if you look at the other crimes he's committed, as I say, the first one was a bit of a crime of opportunity, but the others have been meticulously planned. So it does seem strange to me that, this one very important one would actually be one that he would just be, shooting off a gun into a crowd. Unless,
But if he's just booking this room now, obviously that's a change. So
yeah.
I think he was planning to do something at the wedding. I mean, maybe he was just going to kidnap Kelly,
Yeah, maybe that's what the gun's
he's got
for.
a car revved up in the back that no one thinks is suspicious. Yeah, so we know it's not, that the bridal suite is not the presidential suite. So it won't have that two-way mirror in it. And Sophia, of course, is living in the presidential suite. So. And we know that hotel only has 5 floors. And we know that Sophia and Marcello are on the 3rd floor. Or actually, that Marcello's on the 3rd floor. So if the bridal suite has got to be at the most on the 4th floor, if there's another room above it. So it'll be interesting to see what floor of that hotel we see them on.
That's right.
And if one of them's on the 3rd floor, then they have a chance of running into Marcello. So I would think Marcello and Sophia are both well aware of Peter Flint. So maybe Marcello or Sophia would end up thwarting Peter.
I don't know. We'll see.
So I was looking on IMDb to see who's leaving and who's going to be off the show. And I had populated my 1985 people, and I noticed that we missed someone who left the show about a week ago. And it was Beth. She was only in 3 episodes, and her last episode was the day before Veronica was killed.
So she was maybe a little bit of a red herring.
Maybe they hired her just to fool us. Now, any idea whose final episode was today? I'll give you a clue. There are 3 people we'll never see again.
3 people?
But 2 of them are not regulars.
Okay. Mary Hart, Jeffrey Osborne.
Mary Hart is one. Jeffrey Osborne is not one.
Oh, really?
He's going to be singing at the reception.
I was going to say sour-faced couple, priest.
The minister, yeah, because he was in 2 episodes.
Yeah.
And we have one person one character who's been on the show since almost the beginning, Sally Taylor. has seen her last day in Santa Barbara.
Well,
we will never see Sally again.
She got to go out with a bit of a bang.
She got
then.
what she's dreamed of since high school,
Yeah.
to see Joe and Kelly get married. They had her back for 2 days, which was nice. I was glad that she was there, unlike Dr. Tony, who's maybe she's doing Doctors Without Borders somewhere. There's no other reason she'd miss the wedding of the century.
Yeah. So. Oh, that's actually quite a nice ending for Sally.
Yeah, she didn't end up getting killed, so that was good.
Now, one thing I'm curious about, during the aftermath of the ceremony, Mason has a little chat with Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about, being exiled from the family. I'm wondering if you think that this will be a significant alliance going forward.
Oh, if Mason and Sophia will, once he realizes she's
Sophia? Or if Mason ends up unwittingly being a source of information for Sophia about some aspects of the family. I mean, he's so needy that really all she needs to do is sit there and pretend to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And he can give her all kinds of information, so long as he doesn't recognize her.
Well, she had, her whole 2 episodes alone with Ted and her public place, but meeting with Kelly and her not quite so successful meeting with Eden. So yeah, maybe they will have some time to chat with each other.
Mm-hmm. I'd just like to see how that unfolds a little bit, and if anything about Susan seems familiar at all to Mason, especially when he's sobered up a little bit. Or, as I say, if he gives her particular insights into the family that maybe she didn't have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There weren't any clues or anything that Mason could think. But if we have the reception today, I assume Suzanne Carlyle will magically find herself there.
She seems to be good at doing
her way
that.
Into the wedding. So who do you think will be leaving the show next?
Well, they haven't used Jade and Danny very much, so I'm really hoping they'll get a bit more in the way of storylines. But if they don't, I could see those 2 characters kind of just fading away and, maybe not being a part of the show as much anymore. I hope not, because I really like both characters. So that's one guess I have. I suppose it's possible that Peter hasn't finished his project yet, and he could still murder someone before he actually ends up with Kelly, in which case I still think that the teacher is a possibility just because she's blonde.
Mm-hmm.
Although she hasn't been there since the beginning of the show, so that doesn't really qualify, does it?
Oh, I think she counts as a regular now. She's in the credits, right?
Yeah, that's true.
She's regularly in the credits, so
that's true.
I would say she's definitely, she and Elizabeth are definitely people who could be leaving the show.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. Elizabeth is another really good possibility as well, especially since they seem to have dispensed with the entire Amanda Lockridge storyline. That, maybe I would think the counterfeiting aspect might come up a bit, especially if I don't know if Lionel would go to trial now, but it just seems like where they were perhaps taking the story with Liz isn't maybe going there anymore.
Mm-hmm. The next thing that I remember really from the original viewing is May 20th, so we've got about 4 months where I have no memory of what happened. So.
Yeah. So those are some of my guesses. I don't have one particular person.
All right. Well, we'll see who leaves next, and if we even know they've left, I may have to tell you at the end of an episode. That
Oh, by the way,
no longer on the show.
Yeah.
We will see. As I know who it is, but I can't remember the circumstances exactly. Just like I had realized Sally Taylor was going to be leaving soon when I was checking my list. Mm-hmm. I was really hoping she wasn't going to get killed, but I really couldn't remember. So.
Yeah, so it's nice that she didn't.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we will see you after we watch The Reception.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume we'll hear another lovely song by Jeffrey Osborne during Cruisin' Eden's Dance. And that will be episode 135. So we'll see you then.
See you then.
This week's Celebrity Spotlight is on Mary Hart, who played herself in episode 134 of Santa Barbara. Mary Hart was born Mary Joanna Harum on November 8, 1950, in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. She was Miss South Dakota in 1970 and was a Miss America semi-finalist in 1971, and taught English for 2 years while producing and anchoring her own talk show on the local NBC affiliate. She moved to Los Angeles in 1979 and appeared in commercials as well as Days of Our Lives. She co-hosted PM Magazine, followed by a stint co-hosting Regis Philbin's talk show. Entertainment Tonight interviewed her regarding the experience, and the next day they hired her as a correspondent. 3 months later, she took over for Dixie Watley as the show's co-host. She was famous enough by 1985 to play herself for the first time on the Santa Barbara episode that featured the wedding of Joe Perkins and Kelly Capwell. She has played herself dozens of times since then in shows such as Hollywood Wives, Moonlighting, The Famous Teddy Z, and Blossom. She continues to make sporadic appearances on Entertainment Tonight. In the 1970s, she was married to Terry Hart and has been married to Burt Sugarman since 1989. They have one child. Welcome back. We have just watched episode 135 of Santa Barbara, the wedding reception of Kelly Capwell and Joe Perkins.
And we just got home after a long day of celebrating Joe and Kelly's wedding.
And everyone loved our dancing, pretty sure.
We got our hair down and our buttons undone.
So this is an episode that aired Wednesday, February 6th, 1985. And it starts out at the church with Mason inviting Suzanne Carlyle to the reception. Now, Eden is horrified at the thought of this. She had been hoping that would be the last she'd see of Sophia, dressed as Suzanne Carlyle. But Mason manages to tuck her into coming.
Yeah, in fact, Eden had very graciously offered to drive Mason home because he's basically fall down drunk at this point. And I guess thought she might ditch Suzanne Carlyle, a.k.a. Sophia, at the same time, but that kind of backfired.
So it was kind of a backhanded way of telling Mason he's not welcome at the reception.
Yeah.
So Suzanne says, "Oh, I'll think about it." And then apparently off camera, Eden has a stern talking to with her. And she shows up anyway at the reception. So which brightens up Mason when he sees her.
Yeah.
Mainly because I think he knows it's going to bother Eden a little bit.
Yeah, I think so.
Mason is sensing some tension between them.
Yeah.
So there are interviewers from TV stations around the United States interviewing Kelly. Because they're that famous. And Jeffrey Osborne sings On the Wings of Love. As Joe and Kelly have the first dance. And then he sings Borderline, which prompts Cruz to say that how come everyone's doing the Foxtrot. So he says to him, "Do you remember some of our old moves?" And they get on the dance floor, and by the end of it, everyone has stopped and is just clapping along and watching them dance. And they get a big round of applause at the end.
Yep.
CC seems very happy
Yes.
as he watches it.
Yep. And actually, during the sequence before this, we did see Ted looking a little more cheerful and dancing with Jade. So even he's gotten into the spirit of things.
I don't think he had any lines in this episode.
No,
Or did Jade.
no.
We saw Ruben. Didn't have any lines. Marissa, we saw. I think she may have said one or two words to Joe and Kelly, but she was pretty much an extra as well, like in the crowd. We saw Rosa and Ruben dancing at one point during one of the songs. So Peter is actually there as well, but he's in the driveway, and I assume not his car, because presumably someone would say, "Hey, isn't that Peter Flint's car?"
I would have thought so.
I think maybe he rented a limo. He has a big red box in the passenger seat, and he pulls out at one point to look at it, a dress that he's got for Kelly. He's also got some champagne. Amy begs off early, and Joe and Kelly walk her to her car. And Peter's there watching, and he sees Joe and Kelly kissing, which he's not too happy about.
Yeah.
When Amy gets home, the door on the latch on the door fails to close, and her door is ajar. She goes about getting herself some milk, and someone opens the door. We see a man's hand opening the door, and then she gets her milk and goes into the nursery and sits in the rocking chair. And then we see a man come up behind her and touch her, and oh my God, it's Brick.
Yeah.
So she says, "A good thing you're not the killer." And I'm like, do they know for sure Brick's not the killer? Because has he got an alibi for any?
That's true when you
He's
think
like
about
a
it.
circus guy.
I mean,
they all
we
kind
know
of dodgy?
he's not the killer, but yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if they've ruled out all their friends and family. Now, did you have an alibi for this night?
Anyway, she's very happy to see Brick.
Oh, I guess Brick and Amy and Marissa all have an alibi.
Oh, yeah,
Veronica's
of
murder.
course. Of course, that's right.
Yeah, anyone who was in that theater couldn't have done it.
Yeah.
So, Mason notices the tension between Suzanne and Eden and tries to get Eden to tell him what it is, but she won't.
Yes.
And then Mason tells her she's just like Cece. So that's interesting. We see that a little more in this episode with the way she's trying to get rid of Sophia.
And we also, Mason does, perhaps it's a little later, but he makes a very astute comment when he notices this tension and says to Sophia, "You're the only person who irritates Eden as much as I do."
Ah, that's right. That's right. He did like that about Suzanne Carlisle.
Yeah.
Who, for those who may have just jumped in on this episode, is Sophia in disguise. Mason tells Eden that he's got an announcement to make, and he looks like the cat that swallowed the canary.
Yeah.
He's very happy. Is that what that expression means, or does that mean he looks guilty? Anyway, he's very happy. Mason has a number of great announcements coming up that I remember, but I don't know what this one is. But my guess is he's going to say that he's let Lionel Lockridge out of prison.
Yeah, I was wondering what it was. I thought it could be a few things, and sometimes Mason just says stuff to piss people off as well. So, it seemed to me that an announcement relating to Lionel was the most.
Yeah, because it's an announcement that's going to annoy Cece. So
yeah,
it says, "Come along, Eden. You've got a ticket to the best show in town." Eden corners Sophia and wants to know why she didn't go to the police after Lionel tried to kill her. And she says she didn't know who she was for almost 5 years.
Yeah,
that she woke up in a straitjacket and was given lots of drugs and electroshock therapy, and at one point she had a nervous breakdown and they stopped giving her drugs at that point. And she saw a picture of Cece in a newspaper, and that started her getting her memory back. But it took a long time.
So I guess we have to assume that during this time she was in that mental institution in Alaska.
Well, it seemed to me when Joe was there that it was not that long ago, because that would have been 10 years ago,
Yeah, because
right?
I think they said she had left 5 years earlier.
I wonder if there was some sort of relapse that we don't know about yet that was more recent. So it'd be interesting to see how Marcello got in the picture. Now Cece spots Suzanne, and we notice when Suzanne is with Mason and Cece, she's definitely avoiding making eye contact.
Yes.
She doesn't want anyone to get a dead-on look at her face for too long. So they talk about the book, and he mentions that he does like his privacy. She says, "Well, that's odd. You were married to an actress. How did that work?" And he said, "Well, Sophia stopped being an actress when she had our children." She said, "What about after?" She was an attentive mother. So he ends up agreeing to an interview with her. And when she asks, why he never got remarried, he says that he spent this whole time looking for a woman exactly like Sophia. So then Mason dances with Suzanne and mentions that he has a shocking announcement for Cece. And she sort of almost drops her guard and says, "Oh, Mason, you can't do this today."
Yeah, and you can see this New York accent she's been putting on. That just drops away just for that little moment.
Mm-hmm. So she begs him not to ruin Kelly's day.
Mm-hmm.
So when he gets up and says, "I've got a toast to make and an announcement." So he makes a toast to Joan Kelly, Perkins, and then he says, "I think this can wait for another day." So he does not make the announcement.
I really liked when he gets up on stage to talk, just the reaction of everyone around him. It's sort of a look of horror and foreboding, and you can tell they've been there a few times before with a drunk Mason making an announcement.
Mm-hmm.
No one is looking forward to what he has to say. But it's kind of like almost watching a train wreck, I guess. Can't look away either.
Mm-hmm. Then we have Cece toasting to Joe and Kelly. And then Joe and Kelly go to change into their street clothes. And during that, Cece has an announcement to make, which they miss. And that is that he is engaged to Gina, which seems to surprise Gina, too. But we learn later that they actually were engaged, but she had thought they were going to keep it a secret a bit longer. So.
Now, I had always learned that it is incredibly tacky to make a big announcement about your life in the middle of someone else's life event, wedding or celebrating a graduation or something like that. So
It seemed like Mason was the bigger man of the two.
Yeah,
who,
I
had
actually
announcements.
think this was pretty tacky on Cece's part.
Mm-hmm. So Mason and Eden are standing there, and Mason says he's actually marrying Gina. And Mason laughs, and Eden is not laughing.
No.
And she says, "Why are you laughing?" He said, "Because it's such a mistake." So this is actually quite funny. So,
yeah.
Kelly's kind of indifferent to it. She's happy that Cece's happy. We don't know really about Ted's feelings, but definitely Eden hates the idea, and Mason thinks this is a train wreck waiting to happen, just like Eden, but he's going to get some enjoyment out of it, unlike Eden, who's probably going to have to deal with this on a more close basis since she's living in the house. And
interesting, I would say that actually most of the characters aren't really thrilled with it. When we do hear Joe mentioning it a little later, and he doesn't seem to think it's a great thing either. So.
Back at the Capwell Hotel, we don't know what floor we're on, and we don't know what room he's in, but Peter lays out Kelly's dress on the bed. It's very, very huge. It's like a suite, really. It's got little couches everywhere, and it's like a very non-standard hotel room. It's got a lot of bits and things, and I'm just wondering if they just took some other sets and crammed them together to make this extra fancy room that we weren't going to see for a while, because it had those glass tiles.
Yeah.
It had that for a portion of the wall, and I'm sure you've seen those somewhere recently in a different set. So
it looked to me a little bit like Joe and Kelly's apartment redressed. Or even the Lockridge house. It kind of reminded me of
I think maybe they took
too.
bits and pieces from several sets to make this entryway to the room, and we may end up just seeing the bedroom part of it for the remainder
It
of
actually
the
looked
time.
to me more like a house than a
I
suite.
know, yeah. At first we didn't realize that he was in the hotel. We thought he was in the house. Unless he actually has a house and he's planning to kidnap Kelly, but then why does he need the other suite,
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that's the suite. So Cruz drives Joe and Kelly to the hotel. And, they have to tell Cruz to keep his eyes on the road because they're smooching in the background. Joe's, after they raise the partition, Joe says, "Well, he's just worried about us." She says, "I hope he's not planning on coming up to the room with us." So Peter Flint finds himself a nice little couch in the Capwell Hotel lobby, which is the couch that John Perkins died on, and he sits and waits for Kelly and Joe to arrive. And they do arrive, and he's got his clenched fist thing that he sometimes does.
And we hear that music, or that sort of computer
weird brain music.
electronic beep, 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 beep,
And he
beep.
says, there she is, my beautiful Kelly.
Yeah.
My darling bride.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point I expect him to try to kidnap Kelly.
I think so.
And maybe he'll shoot Joe and kidnap Kelly. I mean, he's got that gun.
Yeah, he's got a gun and he's got a whole new wedding dress for Kelly, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think she'll want to change into that. So, guess what? Another cast member has left the show today.
Wow, who was it?
Well, there's two. There's Jeffrey Osborne.
Mm-hmm.
And someone who's been there since the beginning. Who do you think it was?
So who will we never see again?
Who will we never
episode?
see again? It certainly wasn't clear from what was depicted. There was no goodbye, I'm leaving town scene for anyone.
No. Well, it could just be, as I say, one of the regulars that just won't have story again. We didn't see Danny. Jade we just saw briefly. Ruben we saw twice, but those are pretty main characters. Pretty sure we'll see Ted again.
Well, this was the last episode for Ismael East Carlo.
Oh.
And the last time we will ever see the character of Ruben Andrade.
Really?
Yeah. They don't even recast, so I don't know. I don't remember. I remembered him kind of being there over the years. So the fact that he's gone so soon is a big surprise to me. And I can only assume that Rosa must mention him from time to time. But I mean, obviously he hasn't left town or anything. So it'll be interesting to see if he's just going to join the pantheon of their other two mystery daughters and just, they won't mention that he's left, but he just won't be there.
Yeah, I noticed he was shown twice in the sort of when they were panning over the group.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad he and Rosa got a chance to dance in front of the camera.
One thing I would think maybe is that with Gina, I assume stepping forward into a more prominent role, certainly with her engagement to CC, that maybe it wasn't entirely going to be sustainable for Ruben to be around knowing that Brandon is his grandson. And, all of the complications around that. Rosa's really seems to have accepted that situation a lot more than Ruben had.
Rosa accepts a lot of stuff over the years.
She does, yes. But, that's all I can think is that with Gina becoming more prominent, it just wasn't going to work to have Ruben there being very resentful of the situation with Brandon.
It's interesting because that would really make a good story.
Yeah, it would.
Especially with Santana gone, there's no one left to continue that storyline for her, for her sake. So, this is quite a surprise. And it'd be interesting to see if they do mention anything, like even, maybe that he's quit the job as gardener or anything like that.
Has gone to visit relatives in Mexico.
When, the first time through, you just don't know these things.
Yeah.
And then, a few months go by and you go, have we seen Ruben in a while? But it wouldn't be weird because we've only seen him like 15 times in 6 months, right?
Yeah.
So you really wouldn't know that he was gone, and it just, looking back years later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now that we know these things, we'll see if they ever mention Sally again, if they ever mention Ruben, if they ever mention Beth.
Well, they haven't mentioned Dr. Tony again.
So. No, and I don't really know the background of who's, if the writers are the same, or if they've been shuffled around, and really if whose idea it is to hire and fire people, if it comes all the way from the top, or if the head writer just says, no, storyline reasons we don't need this person.
Or if it's just attrition where they just after a few weeks, they're just not using that person and pursuing a certain storyline anymore, and they just let it kind of drop.
I guess maybe they figure you don't need Rosa and Ruben, especially with Santana out of town.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a surprise when I did my research yesterday. I was not expecting to see, a non-murder victim. be off the show. So, all right, well, it's honeymoon time, so we will find out who gets the best honeymoon, Joe, Kelly, or Peter, when we watch episode 136 of Santa Barbara. See you.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We have just watched episode 136 of Santa Barbara. Original air date Thursday, February 7th, 1985. And this is the honeymoon episode. Now, back at the house, Gina realizes that Mason is still there. Mason says that she'll fit right into the family. And he tells her that she won't be able to hide his secret with Hank forever. He also says, while drinking in the corner, everyone's pairing up except for old Mason. Loses them before he gets them.
He's very drunk and feeling very sorry for himself. And the expression everyone else has on their face is that they wish she would go away or pass out or something. He's sort of needling everyone in the house.
Now, Eden tells Cece that she won't be part of his wedding to Gina. Eden tells him he thinks Gina's a gold digger, but he thinks it's because of Sophia. And she holds her tongue when he's talking about Sophia, because she doesn't really want Sophia back either. So
no.
Mason says, you came back from Europe hoping to be First Lady. Now you're being impeached already. Sophia, disguised as Suzanne, is still in the house too. She's in Kelly's room looking around and finds the teddy bear she gave her years earlier. Sits in the rocking chair for a while. So the family is surprised to find she's still in the house when she comes downstairs. But Mason begs her to stay because he's got something troubling to tell Cece. Sophia begs him not to ruin the day again. And Mason says he's fallen for his charms. So Mason tells Cece it's about the love of his life. And Gina's standing there thinking it's her. And that he's going to tell Cece about Hank. But he actually says that he has proof that Lionel murdered Sophia. So this troubles Cece for the rest of the evening.
Now, I'm kind of wondering about that, whether Mason is saying this just to really upset Cece, because we know that it was actually Warren's tuxedo that the note was found in.
That was about Channing's murder.
Ah.
This is about Sophia's murder.
Oh, I see. Yes, that's right.
So I'm not sure what evidence he has.
No. And does he not mention at some point that about killing Sophia and Channing, or is that something that Cece extrapolates from it?
I thought You mean today?
Yeah.
No, I don't think they talked about Channing at all today.
I thought someone said the murder of Sophia and Channing.
No, I don't
at some point. But anyway.
I thought that Mason had previously mentioned both of them, either in court or maybe that was to Ted. Maybe that was something he hadn't told Cece. It didn't seem as big of a thing to have held back because I kind of thought everyone already knew. But maybe we've been too close to it. So in the lobby of the Capwell Hotel, Peter recalls the lovely wedding ceremony where Kelly pretended to be marrying Joe but was really marrying him.
Yeah.
Joe meets Candy Fox in the lobby. He's alone briefly while Kelly goes to the bathroom, and she suggests if he's lonely, she might be able to provide some company. He laughs and says he's on his honeymoon. So they go upstairs, and Peter approaches Candy and asks her to pretend to be Kelly for the evening, and she readily agrees for $100, and Peter says, I'll give you $500.
Now, she's blonde, unfortunately, for her.
Blonde, yes. Peter puts on a tuxedo, and he has Candy put on the wedding dress that he bought for Kelly. And they listen to music, tapes on Veronica's tape player, which is a lovely evening. At the real honeymoon suite, of course, Joe and Kelly are having dancing and kissing and having wine. And so there are several songs playing in the background whenever we see Joe and Kelly. First, we hear On the Wings of Love, and then we hear The Greatest Love Affair of Them All. And then finally we hear, for the first time in a long time, If Ever You're in My Arms Again by Peebo Bryson. And we hear this music as the scene alternates between Joe and Kelly together and Peter and Candy together.
Yeah, it's a really kind of interesting effect. And in a weird sort of way, both Joe and Peter are dancing with Kelly.
And at one point, while they're cutting back and forth, they're actually showing Joe and Kelly, but playing the audio of Peter and Candy. So it's very, very off-putting to some extent.
Yeah.
And then Peter gives Candy a white carnation to put in her hair, which freaks her out, as you would expect.
Yeah, you could see she
says, "Oh, a white flower."
Concerned about that.
Says, "Oh, white is for brides." So later on, she seems to have forgotten her concern because they're playing music and Peter's opening up the champagne, and she's rummaging around in the tapes and pulls one out and pops it in and plays The Murder of Veronica. Unfortunately for her, Peter has a stocking ready to go.
Yeah.
So he starts to strangle her, and Joe and Kelly actually hear her screams, because, of course, they're right upstairs. And they rush upstairs. Peter climbs out the window, and we see Candy lying on the floor of not the honeymoon suite. And Joe and Kelly both see her lying on the floor there, and I didn't spot the carnation, but I'm sure if it's in her hair, they'll see it.
Yeah.
Now, in the same hotel, Eden runs into Marcello. She reveals to him that she knows that Sophia is her mother, and Marcello stops pretending.
Yeah.
He tells Eden that Sophia actually is the Countess Armanti, that she's not putting on an act. She married Count Armanti years ago, and he's now deceased, but that Marcello is her stepson.
So now we know exactly who Marcello is.
So he's basically Eden's brother, to some extent. So she then recognizes him from the Orient Express, and they actually now tie down the timeline. They say this was last summer.
Yeah.
But she's actually surprised to hear that Sophia was on the train, so the hypnotism did work.
Yeah.
Now, when Sophia arrives, Eden's angry with her for failing to mention that she was married. And Sophia says, "Well, there wasn't time to tell you everything." And she's a little annoyed that Marcello let that slip, because she had wanted to tell Eden. And then she says, "Why were you following me around Europe? Was that love or just curiosity?" And she ends up by basically saying, "To all of us, you're dead."
Yeah.
And Marcello agrees with Eden that Sophia should just come home to Europe.
And I think Eden makes an interesting point here where she basically draws a parallel to the fact that Sophia has left her first family and is now, in a way, leaving her second family too by refusing to go back to Europe.
Now, Warren Lockridge, of course, as you might have guessed, has been in the secret room all this time, heard all of this. I don't think he's necessarily overheard anything new or useful, though.
No.
Right? Nothing that Lionel didn't already know. I mean, we find out Marcello was her stepson. I mean, how useful is that information? So, at one point, Marcello leaves the suite, and I think he hears something from the secret room. I don't think there's a light on in there necessarily.
Yeah.
But he thinks something's odd, and luckily there's a cart there from a cleaner, and he grabs the keys and unlocks the door to the secret room and finds Warren in there. Warren tries to make a run for it or jump him or something, but Marcello knocks him out with a karate chop. He calls Sophia in here. I've got something for you. I think it's a Lockridge. And when Warren comes to Sophia, they question him. How long have you been here? Oh, I just got here. Did Lionel send you? No, Lionel doesn't know anything about this. And basically, they tell him to go back to Lionel and tell him not to reveal her identity to anyone. But Warren tells Sophia that Marcello was right. You made a big mistake by coming here.
Yeah.
So I don't know if either side really had anything on the other in that encounter at the upper hand, because they're both still in the same position. Lionel wants to reveal Sophia's identity. She's dragged Warren into it. And, by finding him in that room, they haven't gained anything other than the fact that now they're going to watch out to make sure no one's spying on them. But,
and they know about the secret room. I guess that's something they could perhaps use themselves at some point. But, I almost thought perhaps they would give away a little bit of Lionel's secret, but they didn't. So I wonder if this will give Lionel a bit more incentive to actually tell Warren what it is. If Warren confronts him with this situation, the fact that they now know he was spying on them.
Sorry, what secret are you talking about?
About the counterfeiting.
Oh, right.
Because that's what Sophia's really holding over Lionel.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't seem to me that Warren would be too troubled by it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Mink certainly would, especially if she thought that a lot of her family's fortunes, or a significant part, was being buttressed by the fact that they had all of these great classical pieces of art, and it turns out that wasn't true.
Mm-hmm. With Lionel squandering money for the last few years, she probably thought there was some security in that artwork.
But, so that's the only thing I thought, that maybe if Warren goes back to Lionel and mentions the fact that his cover's being blown and what Sophia told him, that maybe that would give Lionel an extra little push to tell Warren.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, the more people who know, perhaps the less Sophia really has over Lionel.
Mm-hmm. I mean, definitely Mason's whole thing will fall apart.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if maybe that's why it was done today.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's going to be revealed soon, Mason has very little time to have his big moment. So the writers, a lot of things have happened just because something else is going to happen next. Like, for example, Summer's storyline being wrapped up, and then suddenly she's murdered. So I'm thinking that the fact that Mason told Cece now means that the writers are going to reveal Sophia's alive soon to everyone, or to Mason at least, because he obviously wouldn't proceed with telling Cece something like that if he knew Sophia was alive.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And Marcello makes a really good point in this, where he says, well, look at all the people who now know you are still alive. There's Lionel, there's Warren, there's Eden. I mean, it's becoming less and less tenable for her to be there in this disguise.
Mm-hmm. And the Suzanne disguise has only got a certain life,
That's right.
It's only so long you can pretend to be writing a book, although Julia Hoffman on Dark Shadows managed to stretch it out for 5 years, I think. So.
Well, it also occurs to me that, with the Carnation Killer storyline, with this latest murder, now we know exactly when it took place, because Joe and Kelly literally heard it take place, and they know it took place in the room above them. And it won't take very long for them to find out that that was a room that Peter Flint had.
Well, the thing is, if everyone at that hotel would know Peter, so even if he checked in with a fake name, all those desk clerks, he used to be their boss. Right?
Yeah.
So someone who works at the bellhop or whatever must know, even if it's registered under a fake name, that Peter Flint was in that room.
Plus, he's left Veronica's tape recorder there, I think.
That's right, which
with
Cruz,
the tape in it.
Cruz has seen it in his room, so there's that link. It's probably got Veronica's and Peter's fingerprints all over it.
Mm-hmm.
And as you say, the tape, unless he grabbed that tape, which I didn't really think about the tape recorder in those last seconds of the show, so I wasn't really looking for it. But that would be, if Peter grabbed the tape and somehow no one realized he was the one who rented that room, I suppose things could be dragged out a little more. But he would have had to grab like anything of his from that room, not just the tape.
Mm-hmm. So I guess my point is that I can see that storyline, at least the whodunit part of it, coming to a fairly rapid conclusion. So then they could...
Which means Peter would be on the run.
Yeah.
For some time.
And I mean, Kelly's obviously still going to be in danger.
Mm-hmm. Even with Peter on the loose.
Yeah.
And whereabouts unknown.
Yeah.
It's no different for Kelly than now. He's still after her.
That's right. So there is perhaps a bit of bandwidth opening up for the Sophia reveal as well, to at least a few more people.
So we have a Friday show coming up. So not that this week hasn't already been very exciting, but things will probably ramp up as they approach the end of the week to have a nice cliffhanger for people.
Yeah, it should be exciting.
Yeah, so we will be back after we watch episode 137 of Santa Barbara.
Bye-bye.
While Joe Perkins was marrying Kelly Capwell, Peter Flint was phantom marrying Kelly Capwell. The logical next step for Peter was to have a phantom honeymoon. While Kelly and Joe were at the honeymoon suite of the Capwell Hotel, Peter invited Candy Fox to join him one floor above. Candy had first encountered Joe Perkins in the lobby of the Capwell Hotel when she invited him to join her for a good time after Kelly had fallen asleep. For $500, she agreed to be Kelly for Peter, putting on the white wedding gown that Peter had bought for Kelly. While slightly put out by the white carnation that Peter presented to her and placed behind her ear, Candy was game for the honeymoon to continue until she accidentally put the wrong tape in the cassette player, and instead of music, the sounds of Veronica Gailey being murdered began to play. Peter Flint was quick with the nylon stocking, and while Joe and Kelly arrived soon after Candy started screaming, they were too late to stop the carnation killer from claiming his fifth victim. Candace Candy Fox joins the other residents of the Kelly Capwell wing of the Santa Barbara Cemetery, an uncomfortably fast-growing section dedicated to those who would still be alive, if not for Kelly Capwell.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've made it to a Friday episode. We've watched episode 137, which originally aired on February 8th, 1985. Now, Joe and Kelly are in the street clothes. It's the next morning, and they're giving their depositions to Mason.
Mm-hmm.
And Cruz reports that no one ever picked up the key to the room above the honeymoon suite, and that the management was actually surprised that it was occupied.
Huh.
So I guess Peter had made the reservations under a fake name and then just probably had a key from when he ran the hotel.
Mm-hmm. Very clever.
Wouldn't be surprised if he hasn't got a skeleton key to everything there. So Cruz tells Joe and Kelly that instead of going to Lake Tahoe, they should go to his friend's place in Palm Springs. So they try to at first tell Cruz, oh no, it'll be fine, but eventually they agree. Once again, not really being too worried about Peter or the killer.
Mm-hmm.
So the police officers who are sent out to find Peter find him apparently half conscious at the State Street Saloon. He tells them later that he's very lightweight drunk. That's why he doesn't remember much about what happened.
Mm-hmm.
They bring him in for questioning. He says he went to a lot of bars last night because he was upset over Kelly marrying Joe. And he lists off a list of different bars he's gone to. And when they check into it, they all vouch for the fact that Peter came there. Unfortunately, Peter's story has not accounted for the exact time of the murder. That's still a gap, which is obvious, for obvious reasons. Now, Peter's lawyer is there the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, he doesn't let them get too rough with Peter. At one point, Cruz is called away from the interrogation room, and a phone call comes in from his friend with the contact information, which Peter, who's writing down his exact whereabouts last night, quickly writes onto his arm with the pen that they gave him.
Mm-hmm.
So Cruz comes back, and Peter says, I'm kind of tired of you guys badgering me every time something happens. I'm going to have my lawyer file an injunction against you if you don't stop, hounding me.
Yeah.
And then Cruz suggests, well, why don't you just do a lie detector test then? That'll get us off your back.
Mm-hmm.
And Peter says, sure, why not? Next thing you know, Detective Sergeant Monroe is administering a lie detector test to Peter, which he passes. So now they're kind of stuck because they kind of have to let Peter go.
Mm-hmm.
His lawyer, is aware that he's passed the test. Peter's alone in the room for a while they're discussing his results, and we hear him thinking to himself that he's really clever and that he can stay inside himself and not reveal anything that's really going on. And they show a fly on his hand, and he says, I can even avoid flinching, for this fly I have such control. Now that is obviously a reference to the movie Psycho, which ends with the fly bothering Norman Bates. And Norman says, I'm not going to react. That's what they want me to do.
And I have heard that is actually the case, that people who are sociopaths are actually capable of passing a lie detector test.
One of the people actually mentions that. And Cruz thinks, he must be a real sociopath.
Yeah.
And then Mason actually says, well, we have no evidence of that. So Mason, once again, is shown to really be a stickler for the limits of what he can legally do, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit more, comparing and contrasting this situation with the one Lionel Lockridge finds himself in, and just how much of a stickler for evidence Mason is in that case.
So Cruz goes in to talk to Peter and says, "Oh, Peter, I'm so sorry. I didn't believe you. And now that we know you're innocent, maybe you can help us find the killer. For Kelly's sake, because she's in danger." So they have a long conversation, which you see Peter's, half, angry with Cruz for, suspecting him. And playing along that he does want to help.
Yeah.
And as soon as Peter finally leaves, he gets on the phone at La Mesa and makes a phone call to Cruz's friend and says, "Hey, it's Joe Perkins. Mr. Castillo gave me your contact info. I lost the address to your house." And so he manages to find out where Peter and Kelly are headed in Palm Springs.
Joe and Kelly.
Sorry, Joe and Kelly. At the museum, Augusta wants Elizabeth to sell some more of the paintings. So Lionel obviously hasn't given Augusta the word that Elizabeth is out of that business, and Elizabeth says, "I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But I can give you the name of someone who'll do that for you."
Yeah.
And she tells Augusta she's leaving town and she should say goodbye to Lionel for her.
Yeah.
So this may actually be good timing for Elizabeth. If Peter doesn't manage to encounter her on the way to the airport,
yes,
she might
right.
actually survive the Carnation Killer. Now, Warren tells Lionel that Eden knows Sophia's alive. So this is interesting news. So this is what Warren gleaned in his time in the secret room. But Lionel still won't tell Warren what Sophia has on him.
Yeah.
But he says it's strong enough that they can't expose Sophia. But Lionel's happy that more people know, because then if it does come out, Sophia might not necessarily blame Lionel.
Mm-hmm.
And they decide something. I think they've decided several times already that Warren should get out of town.
Yeah.
So I guess it's a race to see if he or Elizabeth manages to get out of town first, since they both said they're going out of town for quite a while now. Mason tells Warren to come in for questioning later. They're quite busy questioning Peter at the beginning of the episode, but he wants Warren to stick around. So Lionel mentions that. Warren mentions that to Lionel, and Lionel says, "I'll just get out of town, just leave."
Yeah.
So then Mason says to Lionel, "Oh, your son just left." And Lionel says, "Oh, yeah, I told him to, because it didn't sound like it was an order that he stay around for questioning."
Mm-hmm.
So Monroe actually has people tailing Warren, and they nearly catch him at the State Street Saloon. He runs from them. And first they nearly catch up with him at his apartment as he's trying to enter. So he actually has to escape his apartment. And then he calls, he calls Augusta, right? From State Street Saloon.
Yeah.
And he hides from them there. He actually manages to sneak past them. And then Monroe comes in to say Augusta Lockridge has been spotted with a suitcase.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got people tailing her. And Lionel tells Mason that if he arrests Augusta and Warren, that he'll have them up on 3 charges of false arrest. So Warren and Augusta meet at the museum, and she hands off the suitcase and some money, but the police arrive with Mason, and Warren runs into the nearest room, which happens to be the room Elizabeth is in, and she appears to be painting rather than leaving town. And then when Mason bursts in, he just finds Elizabeth there, and Warren's actually hiding out of sight behind a painting. And, Warren has asked her to hide him, and Mason demands to know if she's seen Warren. I strongly suspect Elizabeth will hide Warren.
I think she will, too.
Mm-hmm. So Kelly and Joe drive to Palm Springs in the car. And Lifelong Love Affair is playing on the radio.
Mm-hmm. We actually hear a lot of music in this episode. We also hear Bryan Adams at one point in this State Street bar. Mm-hmm. And we hear Easy Lover as well.
Mm-hmm. And when they get to Palm Springs, there's a nice little exterior set that's been built for this, I want to say cabin, small house, a bunch of cacti around.
Yeah.
And they find the key where it was hidden and go in. And then Peter steps out of the shadows because he's been in the yard the whole time watching them, because he had flown to Palm Springs, unlike Joe and Kelly, who had driven. So the last thing we see is Peter crushing a carnation in his hand, saying, "Now our honeymoon can begin."
Yes. So I wonder a bit about, the difference between the Lionel Lockridge case and the Carnation Killer case, and in that, as you say, Mason is a complete stickler, and weirdly Peter seems to have more resilient legal representation than Lionel does. His lawyer just sort of stands there and says, "Well, there's not really much I can do," whereas Peter's, I guess, court-appointed lawyer is really, really pugnacious and doesn't want Mason to overstep at all.
I think the one thing is, I think Mason knows Lionel's not guilty.
Yeah.
And the longer he can legally just string him along just to annoy him, the better.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Mason feels that if Peter is guilty, that anything they do wrong now could lead to him not being convicted.
Yes, and I think, too, the Carnation Killer is, in some ways, the higher profile case now, and it's the one where there's immediate public danger.
If Mason messes it up.
Yeah, exactly.
But then again, it's his sister that is the main target. So,
yeah.
They keep talking about all these officers they have on Kelly and La Mesa and all these places, but yet Peter keeps managing to get alone with various people. Yeah, so I think Elizabeth should be fine if Peter's out of town, and if she really does leave town, well, he's on his honeymoon.
It's kind of fun to think of her and Warren leaving town together.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. They may have a little chat about the fact that they're both leaving town and leave together.
Yeah.
As I said, I have no memory of a lot of the stuff happening around this time. So.
And it would be really interesting then if Warren does successfully leave with Elizabeth for a period, just what that does to the whole thing between Lionel and Mason. How can Mason justify keeping Lionel there? And he would have lost the leverage with Warren as well.
Yeah, and then the Sophia thing.
Yeah.
Also in play at the same time.
That's
with
right.
Warren gone, Lionel in jail, is he going to send Augusta to spy on Sophia now at the hotel? Maybe. Although Marcello and Sophia now are going to be wary of that secret panel and might just put a blanket over the mirror or something.
Well, I think that, Eden might be a card he tries to play as well. He seemed very interested in that. And if he can get Eden to convince Sophia to reveal herself, I guess.
Yeah, if he has Eden come in, he's going to have to be very annoyed with her for, knowing that he didn't kill Sophia but saying nothing.
Yeah. The other card as well is, of course, when Mason made his drunken announcement to CC. Now, CC is absolutely hopping at the idea that Lionel might have killed Sophia. And he's already upset at the thought of them having an affair all those years ago. So I could see CC putting pressure on Mason to keep Lionel in prison and to find whatever evidence there is against him.
I wonder if CC would end up visiting Lionel.
I'm sure they'll have a confrontation at some point. Not that I think CC is terribly effective, really, for a multi-billionaire, hardline businessman. He often doesn't seem to really know what's going on.
Well, be interested to see how long Kelly, Joe, and Peter are segregated from the rest of the cast in Palm Springs, but at least Santa Barbara is safe from another killing in the near future.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how that one progresses, because it's basically the three of them, I assume, playing cat and mouse down in Palm Springs for the next while.
We'll be back next week for week 29 of Misha and Dianne with Santa Barbara. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, look who's here. Today was a big day, huh? I guess congratulations are in order.